So what does David Bowie have to do with collective evolutionary shift? Well, that's what I want to show you today. I'm Christopher McClure, and welcome to the Shift Show, where we explore the parameters of collective evolutionary shift. So today I'm going to talk about a new movie, a documentary about David Bowie called Moonage Daydream. Moonage Daydream is the name of the song that introduced the character of Ziggy Stardust. So I'm going to share my screen and share with you a chart that I made to help organize my ideas about this. Um, this is the Enneagram, and like this way of using Enneagram I call the ancient Enneagram solutions. So one of the first things I noticed watching this movie was something that I had actually noticed before about David Bowie, is that if you look at his eyes, each eye, his left eye and his right eye, they're different. The left eye, they're different colors, and the left eye is the pupil is much more dilated than the right eye. And I've always thought this, and I just sort of had it confirmed by watching this movie, is that David Bowie had an equally developed masculine and feminine. And the left eye represents the feminine, and the fact that the pupil is so dilated means that it was very open and receptive, like femininity is, and the masculine was more like a smaller sized pupil and more kind of objective. And he had both of those going on in his being, in his psyche, and those that the having both a developed masculine and feminine, and a balance between the two is actually one of the characteristics, the qualities of a person who would be part of the critical mass that will lead humanity to the collective evolutionary shift that we all seem to be talking about. So just there with the eyes, David Bowie shows that that he was really kind of an inspiration and a model for us, and he exhibited that principle of a balance, masculine and feminine. The other thing I noticed, or one of the other things I noticed, was that whenever he was interviewed, he'd be on like these, talk show with noted interviewers, and some of those interviews would kind of be a little snarky, but David Bowie was always very open and vulnerable, which tells me that he was he wasn't he wasn't hiding anything, um, or he was open to he was transparent, and he was open to his own shadow. So he was, by being vulnerable and open, he wasn't like defending himself or resistant. He was actually like inviting a transparency, which is another quality of the in my mind, the people who are going to be part of the critical mass that leads humanity to collective evolutionary shift. That's a quality that they have. He was very self-analytical. He was always reinventing himself, and self-reflecting, and that's part of the reason why he came up with all these different selves, these different characters, including Ziggy Stardust. Um, and it wasn't actually till like the early 80s, I think it was like from 80 to 83, where he actually did he took time off. He went into a deep reflection at that point. It was a 3-year hiatus, and after that, he came out. The album that came out after that was Let's Dance, um, and I believe, it's from my perspective, it was that hiatus that actually got him truly in touch with himself, and then in Let's Dance he was actually expressing more of his complete his complete psyche, his complete being, because as he describes in the movie, you can hear his voiceover several times. He's taught, and he was talking about how he had a difficult upbringing, and and that the reason he came up with the characters that he did was because he actually didn't want to show his essential self. Perhaps it was wounded by the upbringing, or just there was a lack of self-esteem, lack of confidence, and so he presented these characters. And it wasn't until that 3 year hiatus where it's like he seemed to break through into who he truly was, and that became expressed through his music. Um, So this self inquiry is another quality of the people of the people who form the critical mass who lead humanity to collective evolutionary shift. In my perspective, um, he was a Renaissance man. He was a musician. He was an actor. He was an artist. There was his art was shown in this movie, and it's very good. It's a lot of portraits and just very expressive and well done portraits. He was a writer, and of course he was a visionary. And what this tells me is that he was a person who was pursuing their own their own wholeness. And I personally consider myself a wholeness geek. I strive to be all of who I am, and I see that same quality in David Bowie, and so he was exemplifying that in the world, and he was doing that, decades um, before this idea even became popular in our culture. Um, he he was because of his. I'm going to skip up to this point 7 here. He had an older brother who was very plugged in terms of culture, avant-garde, forward-thinking culture, and he turned David Bowie on to jazz, to Jack Kerouac, the whole beat movement, to modern art, and to Buddhism. And with with the philosophy of Buddhism, there's this approach to life which is knows that life is that everything that happens, it's transient, that everything is will change, and David Bowie, he was aware of that, and he embodied that, and he lived his life according to that principle. Um, and then this is kind of a funny one, but he was an impeccable dresser. And that wasn't the way he dressed was an inspiration to both men and women. His use of makeup was an inspiration to women. You can see that there were women interviewed in the movie, and they were um, they were talking about how he he kind of he showed the way of moving beyond through past stereotypes about gender, you know. So and then the last thing, he very there were a couple places where this was probably the most impactful for me, is where he was talking about the deep mystery. Like he had this, and this also goes along with Buddhism and goes along with this triangle that you see here about the deep mystery. For me, that is excuse me, I call that the absolute. It's in Buddhism they call it shunyata. Um, it's that primordial darkness, the black hole at the center of the universe from which we all come, and everything in creation is an expression of that. And he seemed to have a deep sense of that, and uh, of course, along with that is that sense of transience, that everything in creation is comes out of that that deep mystery and goes back to the deep mystery, and and knowing the transience of creation and human life, he the way he approached his life was self-reflective, and that came out in his music, and it came out in all these other ways too. So I'm going to stop my share now, and so once again, what I've been doing is reviewing, in a way, the movie Moonage Daydream, um, which is the new movie documentary about David Bowie in the theaters. And what I hope to have done here and shown you is that he was actually an inspiration. He was ahead of his time, and this kind of the thrust of the of the spiritual evolution of humanity. He was a player in that, and he can be an inspiration to us all in that regard. So I'm Christopher McCora, and this is Welcome to the Shift Show, and thanks for listening. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear from you. If you've seen the movie, I'd like to, if you have any kind of like, oh yeah, I saw that, or I noticed this, go ahead and put it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.